For today's episode, we will talk about cybersecurity.
We're at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. The global cybersecurity market is around $200 billion. Despite that kind of spend, why is it that most companies still say that I'm really concerned about it? That's the reality of the cyber world today. And it's not one virus. Different people around the world using different tactics and techniques trying to attack you from the outside. There has to be this healthy paranoia that has to be there in the system. For me, the biggest risk is not knowing what your risk is. A good place to start would be just allocate something as little as 5% of your total tech budget into cybersecurity.
Welcome to Access Tomorrow, where we dive into the world of payment, innovation, and commerce. I'm your host, Leila Serhan. In each episode, we'll dive into the world of commerce from various angles, looking at how it impacts small business, as well as how it impacts financial institutions. And this podcast is brought to you by Visa. For today's episode, we will talk about cybersecurity, looking at cybersecurity not only as a defensive tactic, but also as a strategic enabler to build resilience in financial institutions across the region. We're thrilled to welcome our guest, Saket Modi, co-founder and CEO of Safe Security, the cybersecurity and digital business risk quantification company. You're based in Palo Alto, California, and you're transforming many organizations in how they perceive and manage cyber risk. You're a Forbes 30 Under 30 alumnus, a Fortune 40 Under 40. I'm going to let the audience probably guess your age. But your innovative approach has been instrumental in shaping cybersecurity strategies for many Fortune 500 companies globally, and not only sculpting their strategy, but also helping them implementing them. So welcome to Access Tomorrow, sir.
Leila, it's an honor to be here with you, and I'm excited about being here not just to share insights, but the fact that we are partnering with Visa now and actually going ahead and trying to see how we can change the world together in the financial services space and make them secured. It's very exciting to be here.
Yeah, and we're very excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive in. So we know that the world of cyber risk is expanding into more and more threats. Insider threats, malware, ransomware, data breaches, AI-driven threats. All of this is coming in the face of chief information security officers. So what did you see happen in the industry, and what strategic position has the industry taken with all of these increased threats?
You know, you very rightly pointed out, Leila, we've never been more vulnerable as an industry, because if you think about the number of hacks which have started going up, just the sheer number of reported incidents have shot up by over 1,000% in the last 60 days. By the way, that's also because of the regulation in the US. The SEC came out with a new rule that you have to disclose if there is an incident which is material and you're a publicly traded company. But what that means is that these incidents were always happening, just not reaching the public eye. And if you think about it, everything which you mentioned, malware and then insider threats and then, it's nation states trying to hack you, expanded attack surface, there's just so much. It's just not small. And this is like just the tip of the spear that we're talking about. And how do you go ahead and actually see all of that together? It can be extremely overwhelming. So to your point about, from a strategicness of looking at cybersecurity perspective, you can only build strategy when you have a vantage point, when you have a point of view which can encompass your, if not all, at least most of your internal telemetry. Couple that with external threat intelligence, and then contextually put that together to say, I see all the pieces together, and this is our strategy. This is the execution of our strategy which should come in. And that is, in my mind, a big missing piece, because most security leaders, risk leaders in organizations have still not got the full picture of the security that they're sitting on. Most of them, if you ask them, tell me, what is your true security posture? They will have very fragmented answer. And the most scary piece, they will have very different answers. So if you ask 10 CISOs, each one of them will give you a very, very, very different gauge or a metric, which is very scary. If you ask a CFO, how well has your company done? How was your earnings per share? How did you beat your estimations or not? Everybody has the same language.
They know.
Everybody knows, and everybody's talking the same language.
Exactly.
Here, everybody has a different. So it's so fundamentally broken on how do you go ahead and forget about actually putting a strategy together, which makes sense, is most efficient. But even to be able to put that together, which is in a data-driven way, that's a big, big, big missing area in the industry today. And that's what we're trying to solve, and we're excited about that.
So we see a lot of organizations that are actually missing the mark on cybersecurity. So what you're saying is that measurement is important. We were earlier, so we're recording live now from the CIMEA Security Summit that is happening in Dubai. And we were earlier on stage with our Chief Information Security Officer for Visa, Subra. And he said, you have to be a pessimist and paranoid. What do you say about that?
So, I totally agree with him. And I'll tell you why. Because the moment you actually think about it, right, if you don't go ahead and actually, think and understand that things are going wrong, there has to be this healthy paranoia that has to be there in the system. Because if you're complacent, open the newspaper or scroll through your feed, every third day there is a big company which is being attacked. World Economic Forum now talks about cybersecurity being the top 3 concerns for boards and CEOs around the world 7 years in a row now. It's not the first time. It's now been continuously reported that that's a huge issue. Now, why is that such a big issue? The global cybersecurity market is around $200 billion. We spend $200 billion every year, growing at 15% year over year. It's one of the fastest growing markets in hundreds of billions of dollars, which is out there. Despite that kind of spend, which is almost $250 billion on cybersecurity, why is it that most companies, CEO and boards still say that I'm really concerned about it?
Yes.
You need that pessimism, you need that paranoia, because the anecdotes that you see on the other side is, yes, my security leader, my risk leader is saying everything's okay, but my peer just got hacked. And I can see actual material impact in their production line, in their revenue, in their stock prices. And this is real. This is not just, fluffy stuff which people are talking about without seeing impact. That's the reason why this needs to happen. And not just for CISOs, but even for business leaders.
It's interesting because I was chatting with one of our client partners from the region earlier, with the CISO, actually. And she was telling me that their CEO starts every leadership meeting with security and ends with security.
Oh, wow.
So we do see some organizations
Talks about the seriousness
that are actually doing this. You often refer to what John Chambers said, that there are only 2 types of companies. Those who know that they were hacked and those who don't.
Yep.
So, and in some of your interviews that I've been looking up, you also said that most CISOs are prepared to get hacked.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens next when they get hacked? And if the reality is that we're all going to get hacked, so why do we need people like you?
That's a great question. And Leila, if you think about it, right, there are 2 dimensions of risk. One is to minimize the risk of going ahead and actually getting hacked. You will get hacked for sure, but it also depends on who's hacking you, right? If a big nation state like China or Russia, and they have huge investments on offensive hacking, if they come after you, there's a high chance, even if you have a very, very large budget, there's not much that you can do about it, right? Because they're equipped with a lot of 0 days, a lot of very, very sophisticated cyber artillery, which is very, very difficult to defend against, right? So yes, you will be hacked if everybody's coming after you, but you don't want to be hacked by a script kiddie. You don't want to be hacked by your competitor. You don't want to be hacked with an average hacking skills which are out there. The bar has to be very, very high. It's almost like you got to be Jason Bourne of Bourne Ultimatum to be able to go in and break into something and make things happen. You don't want somebody normal to be able to come in and do that. So that bar of likelihood, but even if you keep the bar very high, there is a chance that you can still get hacked because there's nothing called 0% likelihood of a breach. Then there's a second dimension of risk management, which is resilience. What happens if you're hacked? How quickly can you come back up? Let me give you some examples, right? Let's talk about controls, because what do you do to protect yourself? You deploy controls in place. Let's take a car as an example. We all drive cars and we all understand that it needs to be very, very safe. Now, within the car, if you apply a control like brakes, it's a control for sure. So now, having the right kind of brakes allows you to reduce the likelihood of a car crash. If your brake is not working, there is a higher probability that you will bump into somebody. However, a brake is not helpful or in taking the impact of a car crash down. For the impact of a car crash, will you end up at the hospital, or will you die, or, it'll be just a scratch on your car. These are all impacts of a car crash that can be reduced by the seatbelt, which is another control. So the seatbelt reduces the impact of a breach, while the brakes actually reduce the likelihood of a car crash. Exactly in the same way in cybersecurity, there are a ton of controls which reduce the likelihood of a breach. You can never get it down to zero.
Yeah.
We all know that no matter what you do in cars, you can be driving at the slowest pace. In fact, you can be sitting still in your car, and still somebody stupid who's drunk and driving can just come and bump into your car. So what do? That despite knowing that, look, I will do everything to protect myself from a car crash, it can still happen with no fault of yours. So therefore, what do? You get airbags. You get the seatbelt. So that the impact of when that car crash happens, the impact can be reduced. Because if you didn't have a seatbelt or an airbag, it could have been really bad. That's exactly what cybersecurity, that how do you go ahead and deploy controls that if you will be breached, how can you come back up quickly? And that's where resilience comes into the picture. So being able to see that picture, being able to see what controls affect what part of the equation, I'm obviously simplifying this so that, everybody gets this, but there's way more nuance to say that what controls affect what part of the risk equation, how much does it equate? Because there are hundreds of controls for likelihood impact, and there are hundreds of controls for loss magnitude impact. What happens if you don't need likelihood controls more and you need to invest more on data backup, right? Or the data resilience or whatever, encryption of data, all of that's resilient controls. So that's where we come into the picture, where we help people see the actual impact of each control and then see that, look, do you need to tweak on the likelihood side or the loss magnitude side or both in some shape or form? And when you do that, you can calculate the estimated return on investment. Because when you invest $1 million and you can reduce the impact, which could have been $200 million down to $150 million. So you just saved around $50 million of impact when the breach occurs. There's a 50x ROI of that $1 million investment. And that makes a very, very justifiable business case to the CFO, to the business. And they feel much better about it to say, look, okay, we were at $200 million without any encryption of data. Now that we've encrypted the data, the impact has come down to $150 million because even if we get hacked, the hackers cannot access the actual PCI data, which would be out there. So looking at that, figuring that out, and having that trusted advisor in terms of the platform and with Visa Consulting, that's really the partnership, and that's what we're trying to drive to the market.
And if I look at it, it's like you say it's probably a partnership with our Visa Consulting team, but it's not a one-time
Absolutely not.
Right? So typically, describe to me what's the kind of engagement you have with those Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah, just think of it like this, right? During the time when COVID was there, right, you had a new variant of COVID coming out every 3 months, right? You had a different vaccine coming out every 3 months, right? You had different ways by which this virus was spreading, and there was so much that was happening. What would be ideal, right? To get a consultant who can actually help you see things both internally. Oh, Leila, based on your antibody count, based on your immunity, and based on the external place where you're at, oh, looks like you're in a community which has widespread COVID. No matter what you do, you will get COVID. What do I do to reduce the impact? Or how do you reduce the likelihood? Can I take you out of the community and place you at a place which is more isolated, etc., etc.? Those are all controls that you can have. So considering the dynamic nature of the first 12 months of the COVID impact, I'm taking it back because I'm not saying it was pretty, but the reality was there was so much happening. That's the reality of the cyber world today. And it's not one virus. It's not a one variant of one virus. You're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of variants which come out on a daily basis of different people around the world with different kinds of strengths and capabilities, using different tactics and techniques, trying to attack you from the outside. As if that was not enough, there's a big threat from insiders. When you talk about a big company, there's a long list of people. You just fired a person or a person is leaving. How do you know the data is not being exfiltrated with that person going to a competitor? So external threat actors, internal threat actors which are out there, coupled with the new attack surfaces, everybody wants to go to the cloud, right? So that just introduces a brand new dimension of risk because you always had data in your data center.
Yeah.
Now, no, that's no longer the case with SaaS and platforms. It's on the cloud is what people say, right? So if it's outside of your premise, there's a very, very different way of managing that risk versus when it was with you. It's almost like you keeping your jewelry with you or keeping it in a shared place with a lot of lockers. I'm not saying it's not safe, but it's just a different way of looking at it, a different way of applying controls. So a lot of complexities, and therefore this is a real time. This is continuous. It is not one time. And this meeting which you mentioned about the lady CISO with the CEO starting the meeting and ending the meeting with cybersecurity, that's not a one-time thing is what I can assure you.
Yes.
That happens quarterly or monthly because he or she understands the dynamic nature of the threat landscape along with your internal security posture change.
Very true. So I think in this day and age, we cannot not talk about artificial intelligence. And I think we're seeing artificial intelligence from both sides.
Yeah.
The good guys and the bad guys. So how do you foresee the impact of artificial intelligence on cybersecurity?
So a couple of points on AI. This is a nice podcast I did a couple of weeks back. It's on YouTube around actually what AI means in a non-technical way. So, we talk about that. And one parallel, because one of the questions I was asked is, how big is AI, right? And a lot of times people don't realize it because early 80s was about personal computer. 90s were all about the internet. Early 2000 was about the cell phone. 2010 and beyond was all about the cloud. And now we are in 2020s, right? And people say, is this one more of those waves that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 decades? Let me put it like this, just for context, right? You add all the 5 revolutions combined, AI is potentially going to be bigger than that. That's how I look at it. It's like invention of electricity, right? Electricity changed which industries? Every industry you can think of. How many lives did electricity change in the world? Every human being, every government, every company, right? And if you don't embrace electricity, you're a dead company. It's as simple as that. That's when, I know today we take it for granted, but that was the case when electricity was invented for the first time. That's exactly what AI is how I look at it. AI needs to be embraced. There's no running away from that. I hear a lot of companies, mine right now is not the right time. We'll put it in the strategy later. For me, it's very simple. In fact, if you're listening to this podcast and, if your company doesn't have an AI strategy, high recommendation, run away from that company because it's almost like electricity is invented and you're still using candles to go ahead and light your stuff. So very, very significant. Now, as risk leaders, as security leaders, when there's something so significant where the companies and the business needs to adapt, and not just adapt in a lagging way, but can potentially lead with that as a change, security and risk people cannot be deterrents. They cannot be the ones who say, I'm not okay with this. So we can't do that. That's not the right security leader. So being able to consciously understand and explain and give visibility of the risk that comes along with AI, with using open source LLM models or using, different kinds of LLMs which are out there on what the impact of that would be. There's a ton of SaaS companies that companies have started using, and most, if not all SaaS companies have some dimension of AI these days, which is embedded into the platform. How does that impact the privacy of the data that's going through? How does that impact the actual security posture of the critical data of your organization? Looking through all of that becomes very, very critical. And that's really the reason why I would go to the point of saying that it's a game changer. If you don't embrace it, it's a problem. And as security and risk leaders, if you don't help companies accelerate their adoption with giving the assumptions and the right way of risks which are involved, I don't think we're doing the right job there.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm looking at how we are using AI in Visa internally.
Yep.
And one of the things that very early on the company did was to actually avail an enterprise secure ChatGPT environment for all of its employees across the globe. And it's a closed environment, so we know that this data is not going anywhere.
Totally.
It's using the data that is inside Visa. It's feeding a lot of the data that us employees using this secure ChatGPT. So I guess I'm in the right place.
You definitely are. And Visa has been known for its innovation for a while now. So that's the reason why, I can clearly see Visa embracing AI.
Yeah.
And that really will not just be a survival thing, but a competitive differentiator as you keep moving into the future.
Definitely. So in this region, we have a lot of small businesses.
Yes.
Right. A lot of the things you're saying maybe might not resonate a lot to them, but I think they're as vulnerable as anyone else. So what lessons can small businesses in this region actually learn from this global ecosystem?
Yeah. So, Leila, the reality is, while it might not seem very obvious based on what we've spoken till now, everything I spoke is actually more relevant to small business than big business. And I'll explain you what I mean by that. The first piece, let's go in the reverse order. We spoke about AI. The good part of AI is that, given the access to AI, which is now so publicly and easily available, it allows small businesses to act in a whole new dimension. Think about it like this, right? 200 years back, if you wanted to start a business, you need to put up a factory, you need to buy machines, you need to employ people, and then you produce a product. Today, if you want to use OpenAI, ChatGPT, or even better, Llama 2 from Meta, which is free of cost open source.
Yeah.
You can use the power of generative AI on a laptop, which is using Llama 2, and you can build your own stuff on top of Llama 2 at what cost? $0, right? So it actually empowers small businesses. Of course, they need to have some degree of skills to be able to do that, but you don't need an army of thousands of people. You don't need to buy a land and put a factory and then you build products on that. So I would say there's never been a more exciting time to be a small business, because every small business in an ideal world wants to become a big business. And what's the difference between a big business and a small business? The access to resources, right? So here, it's almost becoming like a level playing field. To put an app on an app store today, it charges $300. Sure, every small business has that money to be able to do that. And you see these small businesses now becoming big businesses, right? Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Apple, all of them were small businesses 20, 30 years back. And today they're Fortune 100, which is out there. So the point I'm trying to make is that that's the exciting part. But while you do that, you need to be looking at security in a very, very, very serious way. It needs to be actually a bigger priority in the boardrooms or in the leadership meetings of small businesses. And this was a very interesting Accenture report, almost scary, which said that more than 50% of small businesses shut their companies after a ransomware attack. 50%. That's not pretty. And that's the downside of saying that, yes, it's easy for small businesses to launch tech products, but what happens when that gets hacked? What happens if you have one app, you worked very, very hard to get thousands of users on that, and that goes down? The consumers don't have patience, or, they don't forgive it very easily, and that can be disastrous. And that's the reason why I would say for small businesses, unfortunate reality is it's more important to look at security. Now, what's a good benchmark? Where do you start? A good place to start would be just allocate something as little as 5% of your total tech budget into cybersecurity. It's a good place to start, right? Get one person internally who can be called as the chief security officer, or somebody who's a head of security, whatever you want to call it. So having one person internally who owns cybersecurity, and at the same time allocating 5% of your budget, the budget of IT. So when you're spending on cloud, SaaS, building up app, whatever, just 5% of that. If you can put that to cybersecurity, I would say you'd be in a very good spot as a good starter. You're already ahead of 99% of the small companies. Does that mean you'll never get hacked? Of course not. But again, getting that out, finding that out, knowing that objectively is where, of course, we can help with Visa. But on the other side, it's very important for them to start thinking like.
And always think about this likelihood of getting hacked.
Likely and the impact. Absolutely. Okay. You always want to, every conversation has to be that. If you say, I want to buy CrowdStrike, Zscaler, I want to buy Palo Alto Networks, any cybersecurity product, it should not be I want to buy it because I saw a very cool ad. It should be like, by the way, my likelihood of ransomware is very high, and that is a number, 76%, whatever that'll be, and I want to take it down by another 20 points because the industry average is there. And to take that down, this is the investment I want to make on an EDR or a firewall. Or now it suddenly becomes logical, data-driven way of deciding what you need to do, rather than just saying, I want to buy a firewall. What happens with that? Right? Exactly. And pestered you for 6 months. And they said that it's the most important thing for you to buy. It's like a pharmaceutical sales executive coming and selling you a medicine for the longest time. Okay, I will take that medicine and I'll eat it. Well, you might actually not need that medicine. It should be dependent on your health and not what somebody's trying to sell you.
So you mentioned ransomware. I wanted to ask you, given the view that you have on all of those threats, what is the scariest or the biggest threat that you're seeing today?
I think the scariest threat that I am seeing today is not having the visibility of all threats in your environment. What that means in a very simple way is because, look, statistically, I can say phishing and ransomware and insiders and crypto mining, there's a long list. But the reality is it changes depending on your geography, industry, and size. There is no one answer for that, right? So saying that here is a report made by a cybersecurity company, and ransomware is the most important problem, as I said, it's almost like saying paracetamol is the most important drug out there because it's the most important drug and it, cures headaches, therefore I should take it. No, it should be, if you have a headache, you should take that. So for me, the biggest risk is not knowing what your risk is and then just being driven from outside and then trying to drive things. And as Peter Drucker very famously said, you can't manage what you can't measure. Starting by saying, this is where I stand today. And once I know where I stand today, how good, bad, or ugly, doesn't matter. Once you start from there, that's where you go and say, I want to be better and this much better. And to get there, this is what I need to do. That is a missing piece, which I think fundamentally is broken in the cybersecurity industry.
So I want to get to our final question. And we usually end the podcast with a pivot question. So you shared with me earlier that you founded your company when you were in college. And that's the only job you ever had. Can you share, what pivotal moment got you there? And why was it an important moment that got you to found your company?
I define myself, like my definition of my own self is I'm a geek and a nerd. It's really that simple, Leila, because I like diving deep into things. There is a million things that I don't know. I've never entered a kitchen, so I can't even tell you like what the ingredients look like, and I've never cooked anything. I'm really bad at that. And that's one out of the 1 million things I'm really bad at. But computer science and mathematics and physics are the things which are very, very close to my heart. And those are things that I deep dived into from very early days in my career. So I would dive in, and diving in means, understanding how the actual things work at a first principles level. And when you can see something like computers and how do they work at a first principles level, you can then tweak, twist, bend things. It's like a car mechanic can always go in and then make their own custom personalized version of their car that they can be very, very proud of. So I think I always did that. And then because I got reasonably good at that, I think, people started paying me for the same. I'm like, why are you paying me? This is so much fun to do. And I couldn't believe that I was making some money out of it. And this was a decade back. And one thing led to the other. And, you got a bunch of people together. I have two of my co-founders, and we have over 200 people today. We've been growing at north of 200% year over year continuously for the last multiple years. And it's been a blast that we've been having. And today protecting some of the largest companies on the planet while doing that in a unique way, because we're at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity, because we use AI to do the mathematical computation using neural networks, using actual data science to then enable better cybersecurity. So being at that intersection, the two things which I always loved was computer science and mathematics. I still don't believe I get paid for this. So I just, that's a place where I started. 10 years I've been doing this. I'm not sure if I'm employable outside, so I make sure I have this job. So yeah, that's a fun ride I've been having for over a decade now.
That's amazing, Saket. I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think for a geek or a nerd, you use simple words, and I think it's going to speak a lot to our audience. I want to thank you.
Leila, it's such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. And hopefully the audience got something to go out of this podcast with, which makes them think something differently. So thank you so much, and I hope this was worth everybody's time.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We're committed to bring you fresh and bold insights from what's happening in the world of payment in our region. So don't miss our next episode. Until then, stay informed, stay inspired, and always strive to stay ahead of tomorrow. Thank you once again for watching and listening to Access Tomorrow. This podcast is brought to you by Visa.